When, why, and how should I pack my wheel bearings? That's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how often you should pack it, why you should be packing it, and a couple methods on how to pack it. What kind of spurred this video, I had a friend of mine bring his trailer in for some general service, and after a couple of days he shot me a text and said, hey, why you got that thing in there? Why don't you go ahead and check the wheel bearings? I've never done them. So I looked at the age on the trailer, on the VIN tag, and it is a 2016 model. So he had some 2016 OG grease in there. We tore it down, and I would tell you the grease wasn't horrible, but they don't use this trailer a whole lot. They tote the golf cart around on it. But for whatever reason, one of the races inside the hub, once we went to change that out, because it did have some rust for some moisture just from setting, the race was spun in there, so we ended up having to put one new hub on it. So luckily we caught that before we got on the road and lost that thing on the side of the highway. So we're going to talk about all the steps of tear down inspection, why we do it, and we're going to talk about how often we should do it. So stick around, let's get into this and see what we can find. So two of the biggest questions I get when it comes to when to pack wheel bearings is simply that: how often should I do it? Manufacturer is going to recommend that you pack your wheel bearings one time a year. So you're going to do a tear down, inspection, clean up, and repack. I prefer to do a full tear down and inspection, not necessarily use the Easy Lube method. You can see our videos on Easy Lube. The other interval on that, if you pull a bunch, is going to be every 12,000 miles. A lot of people don't put 12,000 miles per year on their trailer, so that's why they say check it annually. I have a few customers that they don't tow it very often, like the one we just shared. You know, they may tow it 1,000 miles a year, if that. So it definitely does more setting than it does towing. So that's where we get into maybe a gray area for some people. If it sets for a couple of years, if I haven't put any mileage on it, do I really need to repack it? You have to be the one to decide that for you. I'm just going to give you my opinion on that. And what we have here, I've had this axle setting on the axle rack. It's been on there for about 2 years. We ordered these for a very specific application and ended up going a different route. So this is a brand new axle. Even though it looks old and abused, it has been sitting on the axle rack, aging in our Texas heat like fine cheese for the last couple of years. So I thought this would be a good one to pull down. We haven't gotten into it. I haven't mocked this up in any way. So what you see is what I'm going to see for the first time here in a little bit. I don't expect a whole lot. I expect maybe to see some moisture in the grease. Maybe the grease has got a little bit liquefied just from being out in the heat. We can see a little bit of lubricant on the outside of the cap. That's pretty normal. The rubber plug will be deteriorated just because it's been sitting out there and it's a couple years old. We'll see some rust in the drum, and we'll talk about that rust once we pull it down, if it is present once we remove the drum. So let me grab my tools. We're going to pop the cap off of this and let's tear it down. So I'm going to take the dust cap off first. If you're going to try to reuse your dust cap, don't use this method. We do not reuse dust caps. They're cheap. We destroy the dust cap so it doesn't get reused. So I use a pair of channel locks normally to pop that off. So the grease is pretty pink in there. One thing I want to look at is the rubber plug. I will tell you, I specifically pull this side down. This faces the east, so it's not in our direct west sun. We will look at the other side maybe towards the end of the video if we have time, but I wanted the side that's not being baked all to pieces. But a lot of times these rubber plugs will rot out. This one's actually in pretty good shape. I will tell you, there's times that we see this rubber plug that's deteriorated less than a year. This center here will pop out, and that will allow moisture and dirt and any other crap to get in there. So it does have some grease in it. The grease is not in new condition, but it's not bad. It's a little pinker than what I would like it, and what that is from is some humidity is leaked in there. Our humidity is down today. I think we're only about 137% humidity. So if you live in a humid climate, some of y'all in the Midwest and even in the Northeast, y'all have been beaten up by some humidity this year. I've been watching the weather on that. Oh, and for all y'all watching, look, special treat, I brought out the good shop rags today just for y'all. We're gonna spend the big bucks on shop rags today. So let's pop off the retainer. Now some of these will have a jam nut retainer like this one, some will have a cotter key, and some will have a tang style tab that bends down. Let's pull the jam nut off. We have our outer washer and bearing. So you can see there is grease in the bearing for sure. Like I said, it has liquefied some. Not horrible. So now let's look inside the drum. So this is the first time I'm seeing it. You can see the rust, and we'll talk about the rust. So that is a lot of rust. You can see exactly where the shoes have been setting. They've caught water in there. During the winter time, this water will get in here and freeze. At times, that's where you'll see a lot of rust if you store your trailer and don't roll it a bunch. Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of rust in here, but don't be freaked out. It is not uncommon to see a brand new axle from the manufacturer that has close to this much rust in it, believe it or not. When you go to use this, it will knock the rust off just from friction. That being said, if there's a ton of rust, or if you get dirt dauber nest or any other debris in there, it can get in between the drum and the shoe surface and cause a lot of squeaking, and it could cause some lockup. So you see the amount of rust. The inner seal doesn't look bad at all. We'll pop that out here in a minute, but let's take a look at the brake shoes themselves. So we have some heavy rust, top and bottom, but like I said, again, this axle has never been installed, never been used. The other main thing I want to check out, if it sets a long time, it can rust up here on the magnet arm and it will seize up. The smaller axles, I would say 7,000 pound and below, they do a better job about not seizing up. We do see a lot of the bigger axles, 8K and larger, specifically on 10 and 12s. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's because the shaft is bigger, so there's more contact surface in there, they will get rust. And it is not uncommon to see one of those that this will not even move. So your brakes will not work, because when they're magnetized, all this is doing is just grinding on your drum. It is not engaging the brake shoe assembly. So that's some things to look for. So this rust is not awful. The grease is not awful. It looks a little better than what I thought it would. I don't see any rust present on the spindle. I don't think we'll find any on the bearings either, but we are going to wash those bearings in our parts washer. If you don't have a parts washer, there's no need to run out and buy a parts washer. You can do this with some brake clean or a water-based solvent, a water-based cleaner that you can buy, like Farm and Ranch store. Most of those places have it. You can put it in a bucket and wash that out. Just make sure you're wearing proper PPE to do that. So we're going to take all the grease out of the drum before I put it in our parts washer, and then we will come back and show you how to clean the drum, how to clean the brake assembly, and do a little bit deeper of an inspection. Then we'll repack and put it back together. And at the end of this video, we will decide whether or not we need to pack our bearings once a year, every couple of years, every 10 or 12 years, whether they need it or not. So stick around, and remember, when you go to click to subscribe or leave us a thumbs up, leave us a comment. We've had some great comments here lately. We've actually got some video ideas out of those comments that we will be shooting some video on that pretty soon. I mean, after all, I've started wearing my gloves and we got better shop rags, so I am making improvement. I'm a changed man this morning. We're gonna pull the grease out of this drum and get it in the parts washer. And remember, something is critical. Keep the bearings with the drum they come out of, and mark the location of the drum on the trailer. If this is off the right rear, keep all that together so you put it back in place. You never want to put, especially if you're using your old bearings, if you're repacking, if they're still in decent shape, you don't want to mix those up with drums. You want to keep the bearings with the original races, with the original drum, on the original brake shoe, because if it has any wear on it, those wear differently between the 2 or the 4 or the 6, depending on how many axles you have. So don't mix those up. You could cause failure, excessive wear, and some issues. So just mark those. So we're gonna put these in the parts washer, and they will be a little cleaner here in a few minutes. So once you have the drum off and the brake assembly exposed, one thing you need to do, especially if this is not a brand new shredder, if you have any use on the shredder, if you have any miles on it, you do not want to start sanding on this. You don't want to do anything until you wash the brake dust off. Don't take your air compressor and blow all the brake dust all over the shop, into your lungs, everywhere. Take some brake clean. That's the purpose of it. Spray everything down. That will minimize the dust and help clean it as well. And you can do the same thing to your drum. You're likely not going to have a heated parts washer like we do, so you're going to spray the drum down. Make sure you get into where the studs are. There'll be a lot of brake dust build up there and into any corner on there. To get all that off, you don't want to breathe that and blow it all over your shop. Brake pad and brake shoe material today is not as toxic as it once was, but there's no need to be inhaling that. The other thing we're going to do, I'm going to talk about it now because you're not going to be able to hear me. We are going to sand the rust off of these. We're going to clean the magnet up. We're going to clean the drum up. But I am going to be wearing a respirator. So this is the respirator I recommend, just a half face 3M. They're not super expensive. If you keep them in a bag when you're not using it, it will last a while. But if you do anything DIY around your house, whether you're sanding wood, paint, whatever, spraying stuff, you should have one of these. They are pretty handy. It's better to have one of these than get all that crap in your lungs. So when we get ready here, I'm gonna do a little explanation, then I'm gonna put my half face on and I'm gonna show you how to sand it. You're likely not going to have some of the tools I have, so I'm gonna show you how to hand sand this. Once I show you how to hand sand it, then I'm gonna sand it how we would here in the shop. I like to use 80 grit sandpaper. It doesn't have to be DA paper like this, just anything rough. The easiest way to do it is just a sanding motion to go along with this, and that's fine to get started, but you really want to put a non-directional scuff on here. So if you sand it this way, that's fine. Put some circles in it, put some crosshatch in there so it's not directional. If it's got some crossing in there on the brake shoes and on the drum, that will just help them burnish in a little better. So the same thing here. If you're sanding here, it's easy just to get in there and do it like that, which is fine, but then just try to make some non-directional movement on there as well, along with the magnet surface. We'll let that dry off and I'll show you what that looks like. This wasn't too bad. Now, if you have some shoes that's got some miles on it, you're gonna have some glazing, you're gonna put more elbow grease into it than I did. This is a new shoe that just had a little bit of rust on it. So if it's glazed over, you're gonna have to put some elbow grease in it if you don't have a DA or something to sand with. But once you do that, you'll knock that glaze off and it will just help the brake shoes to burnish and to stop properly. So you can go ahead and take a look and notice I didn't blow all that dust off with a blower. I washed it off with brake clean. So if you look at that compared to the other side, so it looks a little better. So now I'm gonna sand a little portion of the drum. That's gonna be tough. There's a lot of scale in there, but let's see what we can do by hand. So you can see we got a majority of it off. You don't have to worry about getting all the staining off of it, just the scaly rust. Once this gets burnished in, you start using it, it's gonna clean these up nicely. So I'm gonna show you on camera how we do it. I'm out of breath because it's hot and humid, and wearing the respirator makes it a little tougher. So we'll get this cleaned up, then we'll pack it and get it put back together. So now we got everything cleaned up. It is not a mirror finish and does not have to be a mirror finish. You just need to have all the scaly stuff off. Like I said, get it as non-directional as possible. That will just help with the burnishing process. Same thing on the brake shoes. Just make sure it's clean. Just look around, make sure you don't have any dirt, dauber nest. Once you get it washed off, like I said, I did not blow this off with the air blower. I rinsed it with a brake clean. Check your adjuster, check your spring. This is a good time on this adjuster to take a pair of channel locks or a pair of pliers and move it to see if it is free. If it is not free, you can put a little bit of lubricant in there. You can spray a little on there. Once you do that, you need to wash off any area around here. You don't want that dripping, you don't want much. You want to clean that back off. You just want some on the inside. The other thing you can do is remove the adjuster, but most of the time, if you just clean it up, spray just a tiny bit of lubricant in there, move it around to make sure that you're gonna be able to adjust it once you put it back on, and then wash off any oil that may drip down. You don't want that on your drum and contaminating your drum surface or your brake shoes. Another place you can put a little grease that will help with a brake squeal is right in behind here where this armature moves back and forth. It comes with a little grease from the factory. You can see most of it's gone. You can smear just a tiny bit. It does not need much. You don't want a big old glob on there. I mean, just a little bit. That will just help as it's moving back and forth, just to help with some squealing and squeaking. So now I'm going to show you the old school traditional way to bearing pack. Then I'm going to show you how to do it with a handy packer. If you're going to be doing this on a regular basis, I'd recommend buying one of those. If you're going to do this occasionally, you can do it the old school method and it will work just as good. The handy packer just makes it a little simpler for you. So you're going to want to take you some grease, put it in the palm, and then take the bearing, so it has a taper to it. Take the larger side of the bearing. You're just going to take that and you're just going to move that back and forth. See if you can see that. I'm just going to do one little section so you can see the grease coming through. So as you can see the grease coming through, that section is packed. You'll move on and you want to do the whole bearing that way, the inner and outer. This is the way I learned to do it. A lot of people still do it this way, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this. Just with the handy packer or some other style packer, it just makes it a little easier on your palm. So you can see that about half of that bearing is packed. Go ahead and finish that out for your inner and outer. Now I'm going to show you the handy packer. So you would take the bearing tapered side down, put the bearing in, a simple push. Bearing is fully packed all the way around, and that's just a lot quicker, a little easier on your palm. Do your inner and outer. And remember to check the description below. We'll leave some links to the handy packer and maybe some other products we used, if that will help you out in your maintenance. So that one's packed as well. So now that we've got those packed, we're going to put some grease inside the drum. Insert the inner bearing. I like to take a little brake clean, spray it on the rag, and just wipe this little intersection down where the seal is going to go in. Especially if you're using this for marine application where it's going to need to be submerged, you're going to want that seal. Some seals are coated, some you have to put some silicone on. You can check our marine video out for that. Let me grab a seal, we'll install that, then we'll put the front bearing in. So this is a non-coated seal, so we're going to put just a little bit of RTV on here just to make sure it gets a good seal, and it will be suitable for marine applications if it is an easy lube setup like this one is. So it doesn't need much. When you drive the seal in, just take your time, walk it around. You're going to put half the hammer on the seal, half the hammer on the drum so that you don't overdrive it. You can also use a block of wood, works fine. I don't prefer the block of wood because you really can't see what you're doing. And I'm just going to wipe any excess off of this. I'm going to do one last check in the drum to make sure there's no grease, like right there. I'm going to wipe that off. If you put all the time in to make it clean and you get it greasy now, it's a good idea to just do a final wipe down if you touched it with your dirty hands. I'm going to wipe the spindle off. We've already sprayed it with brake clean. Make sure this surface up in here, especially if you have a used trailer, it's gonna have a lot of brake dust. Make sure all of that is off of there because it will act as an abrasive and get down in the seal and chew your seal up. So we're gonna carefully wipe some grease on the spindle, not to drop any on the magnet. If you do, it's not the end of the world. Just get it off before you install the drum. So now we're gonna install the drum. And then we're gonna use that grease there just to get some on that race. And we'll put the inner bearing in. And then we're ready for our washer and our nut. So whether this is a drum or a non-brake axle, the tightening procedure is going to be the same. You're going to tighten the nut clockwise, spin the drum counter as you're tightening down. You're going to bottom it completely out. Once you bottom it out, keep the drum steady. Completely loosen. Completely bottom out one more time. Once you do that, on about a quarter of a turn to set the proper thrust. And with this one, it does take a jam nut retainer. Now I will tell you, on the used axles, we don't reuse this. We always replace this. This is brand new. This is perfectly fine. And if you need to move the nut a little bit to get that on there, it's fine. So that part is done. Now I like to wipe off the excess grease with a dry rag, just where the dust cap is going to go in. And then I will take the rag, similar to I did for the seal, put me a little brake clean on there, and I'll just spin the drum and try to get at least part of that surface cleaned. And then on the dust cap, we're going to put a little silicone on it as well, for two reasons. If it is going to be used in a marine application, that is required so you don't leak water. But this also helps keep the dust cap on, in my opinion, and don't lose it down the road. We see a lot of trailers on the road with missing dust caps, and all that does is introduce everything out in the elements. We use a sealed or a dust cap driver. If you don't have one of these, that's perfectly fine. You can use a small punch and tap it around. Try not to hit out here because you will bend the dust cap. And remember, once you've gone this far, just make it clean. And now it is ready to put the wheel on. And just remember, after you put the wheel back on, tighten the lug nuts. After you spend some time on the road, retighten the lug nuts and retighten the lug nuts some more so that the wheel doesn't fall off. But before you take this off the jack stands and get it on the ground, you need to do a brake adjustment. So check out our brake adjusting video on there that will help you adjust your brakes. Whether they're manual or whether they're auto adjust, you need to do an initial adjustment, and we will explain the rest of it in the brake adjusting video. So back to the question. If I don't use it very often, like this has never been used, did I need to pack my bearings? Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I can tell you from what I know. If you don't know, you don't know. If you're broke down the side of the road because you didn't do it, you will know. If you go ahead and open it up, spend a little bit of time, you'll have a peace of mind about it. I'm a peace of mind kind of guy. If I'm going on a trip, I don't want to have to worry about this. I'd rather spend my time focusing on maybe what I'm doing, the job I'm doing, or maybe the time I'm spending with my family. And I don't, if I can spend a little time now to not cost me, you know, hours or possibly days down the road in the middle of nowhere, I'm just going to spend the time. So in my opinion, do it one time a year, whether you move it or not, unless you're running around the farm. But that's a decision you have to make. Whether you do it or you don't, we're still friends on that. I'm just telling you from my experience, I rarely ever have an axle or trailer come in that has damage due to over maintenance. It's usually lack of maintenance. So one time a year, just have it, you know, it's kind of like changing air filters on your HVAC system. You change those dudes once a month, you don't have to worry about it. You pack these one time a year or every 12,000 miles, you don't have to worry about it. So make that decision. If this is an easy lube, yes, you could have done that. You can see our easy lube video on that. But I'm gonna tell you, I just like the old school method. I like to see what I'm working with. I like to put my hands on it, I like to put my eyes on it. So at the end of the day, I know that it's been done properly and there's no question about it. Hopefully this answers any questions, and we'll see you soon.